riches or Valhalla.
Imagine the shock. A people who had faced Rome, Byzantium, and their own bitter rivals suddenly see monstrous ships with dragon heads gliding up their rivers. The attackers weren't Muslim, Christian, or Jewish. They were strangers from a frozen world far to the north, Vikings. And in 844, they descended on the jewel of al-Andalus, Seville. This is not the Viking story you were taught. It's a tale of blood, fire, betrayal, and a clash between two worlds that had barely known of each other. By the end of this video, you'll discover why these raids terrified the Islamic world, forced it to build a navy from scratch, and left scars that shaped the history of Spain itself. Stay with me until the end, because this forgotten war reveals a brutal truth about the Vikings you've never heard before. When most people picture Vikings, the image is almost always the same. Grim men in furs, storming an English monastery, torches in hand, monks fleeing in terror, or perhaps raiders plundering Frankish villages along the Seine. But that is only half the story. The hunger of the Northmen was never satisfied, and their ambition pulled them far beyond their homelands. Their ships were miracles of design, long, sleek, and shallow-bottomed. They could brave the furious Atlantic one day and slip silently into shallow rivers the next. This gave them an unmatched reach. By the early 9th century, their sails were spotted not just in the icy seas of Scandinavia, but along the warm coasts of North Africa and even deep into the Mediterranean. And there, glittering on the horizon, stood al-Andalus, Muslim Spain. To Christian chroniclers, it was a land of mosques, palaces, and scholars. To the Vikings, it was something else entirely: opportunity. Gold gleamed in its markets, slaves could be taken from its villages, and glory waited for any warrior bold enough to seize it. Yet, beneath its beauty and sophistication, al-Andalus was vulnerable. Its cities had grown wealthy under the protection of the emir, but few believed northern raiders would ever dare come so far south. Its rivers unguarded, its ports exposed, its people unprepared for the storm that was about to strike. And so the question was never if the Vikings would come, but when, and just how brutally they would carve their arrival into Iberian history. The first warning came to the Christian north. In 844, Viking sails appeared off Galicia and Asturias. Ramiro I, the king of Asturias, raised his men and faced them in battle. The chronicles tell us he crushed the invaders. But victory was only partial. The Vikings, clever as ever, didn't retreat home. They shifted their focus further south. They had tested the defenses of Christian Spain, and now their eyes turned to the Muslim south, where riches were greater, walls thinner, and defenses weaker. And so began one of the darkest raids in Iberian history. The Viking fleet, perhaps 60 longships strong, moved like a thundercloud rolling down the coast. With each day, the shadow of their sails grew longer, and the panic spread faster than the oars that beat the sea. Their first great target was Lisbon. For nearly 2 weeks, they lingered there like a plague. Chronicles describe fire sweeping through the city, markets looted, and captives dragged away in chains. Those who resisted met the blade. Those who fled were hunted through the streets. The Vikings had not come to raid lightly and retreat. They had come to feast on the wealth of Iberia. From Lisbon, the storm rolled further south. Cadiz felt their fury next. Then Medina Sidonia. Town after town fell before them. Homes burned, sacred places were defiled, and the terror was such that some fled inland, abandoning everything rather than risk the dragon-proud ships that haunted the horizon. And yet, even this trail of destruction was not the climax. For the Vikings were not content with harbors and coastal towns. No, they wanted more. With audacity that bordered on madness, they turned their ships inland, steering up the Guadalquivir River. Each oar stroke carried them deeper into the heart of al-Andalus, toward a city that had never expected to see northern invaders at its gates. Seville, rich, proud, unfortified against such a threat, was about to learn what it meant to face the fury of the north. The question was no longer what they wanted, but how far they were willing to go. Picture the scene. September 844. The heat of Andalusia lingers in the air. Farmers see something moving on the horizon. A fleet of ships, Long and sleek, their prows carved like snarling beasts. The ships slip silently upriver, then suddenly beach on the banks. The locals had no idea what they were facing. They had never seen a Viking before. Within days, camps sprang up near Seville. The emir's capital, Cordoba, was unprepared. The great city of Seville, with its mosque and markets, was about to face the unthinkable. The first days of October 844 marked a turning point in the history of al-Andalus. Seville, proud and wealthy, was unprepared for the northern storm that had descended upon it. The Vikings struck with precision and brutality, moving through the streets like shadows of death. Defenders fought valiantly, but the raiders' axes and swords carved a path through homes, markets, and alleyways. Chronicles describe the plundering in vivid detail. Gold and silver seized, silks and spices stolen, families torn apart and dragged toward the waiting longships. Smoke spiraled above the city, filling the sky with a haze that mingled with the cries of the wounded. Attempting to burn the great mosque, the Vikings found their flames useless against its stone walls, but the symbolic terror had already been inflicted. The city's heart had been violated, its people left trembling with the raw fear of northern steel. Yet in their arrogance, the Vikings underestimated their foe. Every act of destruction, every life taken, was a spark igniting the fury of a ruler who would not stand idly by. They had awakened a lion, the emir of Cordoba, Abdurrahman II, who would respond with a force and determination unlike anything the Vikings had faced before. The streets of Seville may have smoldered, but the real battle, the one that would decide the fate of the raiders, was yet to come. The hunter had become the hunted. Emir Abd-al-Rahman II was not the kind of ruler to sit idle while his cities burned. The moment the smoke of Seville reached Cordoba, he moved with a swiftness that matched the raiders themselves. Orders went out across al-Andalus. A navy must be built, immediately. Until now, the Muslims of Iberia had looked inland for threats. Their rivers and coasts were weakly guarded, the sea considered a distant frontier. But the Vikings had changed everything in a matter of days. The emir summoned his most trusted generals. Isa ibn Shuhayd, governor of Seville, scarred but unbroken from the first assault. Musa ibn Musa, a powerful frontier lord who had fought Christians in the north, and others who knew the land as intimately as the raiders knew the sea. Together, they forged a plan of resistance. What followed was not a single grand battle, but a grinding series of ambushes and skirmishes along the Guadalquivir. Villages hid soldiers in orchards and reeds, striking suddenly when the longships passed. Muslim horsemen harried Viking raiders whenever they stepped ashore. It was a brutal chess match, Northmen with fire and axes against defenders who knew every bend of the river. For Abd-al-Rahman, one truth burned brighter than the flames of Seville. The city must never fall again. The final battle came in November. Muslim forces trapped the Vikings near the river. Many longships were set ablaze, warriors were cut down, and captives were executed to send a message: never again. Of the 60 ships that entered Spain, few escaped. Some survivors were ransomed back to the north. Others were enslaved, the same fate they had dealt to so many in Europe. The terror of Seville had ended, but its consequences had only just begun. When the smoke cleared and the last Viking corpses were dragged from the riverbanks, Seville stood, but it was a wounded city. Its streets were charred, its mosque blackened, and its people haunted by memories of screams echoing through the night. Yet from those scars, a new resolve emerged. Emir Abd-al-Rahman II ordered Seville to be rebuilt, not just as it had been, but stronger, harder, and vigilant. New walls rose where old ones had crumbled. Watchtowers dotted the river, silent sentinels against any return of northern sails. Garrisons were reinforced, and the riverbanks turned into lines of defense rather than open doors. But the emir's most decisive move was the creation of a true Andalusian navy. No longer would the rivers and seas of al-Andalus be left to fate. Shipyards came alive. Craftsmen hammered wood and iron into vessels built not for trade, but for war. Crews were trained, soldiers drilled, and the Guadalquivir became a guarded artery instead of a highway for invaders. The Viking raid had failed to claim territory, but it had succeeded in reshaping al-Andalus. In a single season, the emir had transformed a complacent power into one braced for storms. The lesson was brutal, but it was learned well. The Viking hunger for silver and glory did not end with their defeat in 844. 15 years later, in 859, a new fleet set its sights on al-Andalus. The raiders had not forgotten the riches of Seville, and they believed the Muslims might once again be vulnerable. But when their longships approached Iberia's coasts, they found a very different enemy waiting. This time, the Andalusians were prepared. The emir's navy, newly built and strategically stationed, patrolled the waters with purpose. As the Vikings attempted landings, they were harassed by swift Muslim ships, which unleashed arrows and hurled fire upon their wooden hulls. Skirmishes erupted along the coast, but unlike in 1844, the defenders were coordinated. The battle was not one-sided. Vikings fought fiercely as always, but the advantage had shifted. Andalusian ships cut off supplies, harried stragglers, and denied the raiders safe passage inland. The once terrifying Norsemen found themselves outmaneuvered at sea, where their longships, built for rivers and quick strikes, struggled against a professional navy. The lesson was clear. Al-Andalus had adapted. The days when Vikings could sail up the Guadalquivir and sack Seville with impunity were over. Iberia would never again fall so easily to northern steel. But here lies the twist. Not all encounters were of blood and fire. In time, Vikings shifted from raiding to trading. Arab merchants and Norsemen exchanged goods, silver, and slaves. In Baghdad, Viking slaves were sold in markets. Norsemen even carried Arabic coins home, leaving them buried in hoards across Scandinavia. Enemies at first, the Vikings and Muslims became reluctant trading partners, proof that even the bloodiest wars can evolve into unexpected alliances. Yet still, the memory of fire in Seville lingered. Why did the Vikings succeed at first? Their ships could sail up shallow rivers. Their warriors struck quickly, without warning. No walls seemed strong enough. But they were not invincible. The distances were too great, the Andalusian response too swift, the defenses too strong. Viking bravery could not match Muslim organization and resources in the long run. Which raises the question, what if they had succeeded? What if Seville had fallen permanently into Viking hands? The truth is, Viking raids on Muslim lands left little permanent mark. The emir's navy ended their hopes. The Andalusian state was too powerful, too centralized, too well organized. Unlike in England or France, where fragmented rulers could be picked off one by one, al-Andalus stood united. For the Vikings, Iberia was a brutal lesson. Not all lands could be conquered, no matter how fierce their axes or how swift their ships. But that doesn't mean the raids were forgotten. In Muslim chronicles, the Vikings were remembered as magus, fire worshippers, demons from the sea. In Scandinavian sagas, the South was remembered as a land of wealth and bitter resistance. The raid on Seville changed the balance of power in Iberia, forcing Muslims to strengthen their defenses and remain vigilant for centuries. And it serves as a reminder that even the most feared raiders in history could be humbled. So what do we learn from this clash of worlds? That no empire is untouchable. That even the Vikings, those masters of terror, met their match in al-Andalus. And that history is often written not by those who strike first, but by those who endure. If you've enjoyed this dive into one of history's forgotten wars, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss our next journey into the shadows of history. Because if you think the Viking raids on Muslim Spain were shocking, wait until you see the scandal that unfolded when a European king secretly allied himself with his supposed enemies. Click the next video on your screen, and I'll meet you there.